Listen. Ask. Educate yourself. Use supportive words. Be kind. These are just some of the ways to help, because mental health affects us all. Join the conversation.
Welcome, everyone, to Agree or Disagree, the podcast. My name is Kevin Olenek. You can add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenek. Like Agree or Disagree, the podcast on Facebook as well. Follow me on Twitter at KVOLE. You could also subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcast listening tool is from. And yes, by the sound of what you've heard, and if you have been listening for the last month watching CTV, today is the day that is Bell Let's Talk Day. It is an initiative that started back in 2010. Back then, the words mental health were not part of our main consciousness. We used words more like cheer up, don't be so depressed, smile more. That was part of our language. But thanks in part to days like this, and education and conversation, that has changed. According to letstalk.bell.ca, as a result, institutions and organizations, large and small in every region, received new funding for access, care, and research from Bell Let's Talk and from governments and corporations that have joined the cause. Bell's total donation to mental health programs now stands, and this is the exact amount according to their website, $93,423,628.80, and we are well on our way to donating at least $100 million. Of course, some facts about mental health. According to the Mental Health at CMHA website, Canadian Mental Health Association website, for those that are listening outside of Canada, mental illness indirectly affects Canadians at some time through a family member, friend, or colleague. In any given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental health problem or illness. It affects people of all ages, education, income levels, and cultures. Approximately 8% of adults will experience major depression at some time in their lives, and about 1% of Canadians will experience bipolar disorder or manic depression. Now, how common is it? By the age of 40, about 50% of the population will have had a mental illness. Schizophrenia affects 1% of the Canadian population. Anxiety disorders affect 5% of the household population, causing mild to severe impairment. Suicide accounts for 24% of all deaths among 15 to 24-year-olds and 16% among 25 to 44-year-olds. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death in both men and women from adolescence to middle age, and the mortality rate due to suicide among men is 4 times the rate among women. Our guest today is going to help us unpack this conversation, the pros, the cons of Bell Let's Talk, and where we're at really on mental health awareness overall. Suzanne Blair has spent 2.5 years planning and researching midlife as her chosen topic for her MSc in psychology. Eventually, Midlife Transitions, Learning from Personal Experience was the final title. Her work is very much inspired by the participants of her research study. She is driven to help people navigate the changes and move through the transitions that they want to be in the best way possible for them. And she joins me from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. How are you today?
I'm very good, thanks, Kevin, and thanks for inviting me today.
Yes, thanks for coming on. It's only like a very brief what I have taken from this website. So maybe tell us a little bit more about what you do and what your passions are, because that's just one paragraph. So kind of tell us a little bit about your journey and who you are from your perspective.
Well, I'm a mum and I am married, and so just my career in healthcare actually is what really got me interested in mental health. And then several years ago, I actually had quite a significant bout of anxiety and situational depression. And so since then, I have been talking about mental health quite a lot, because I very strongly believe that it's only by talking about it that we are going to break down the stigma, and we are going to start having those meaningful conversations about what mental health is and why it really, really matters.
Yeah, okay. And there's a couple things just before we get into that, you mentioned situational depression. Can you not talk about your situational depression, but maybe from your expertise and your thought process, define what situational depression is?
So the situational depression is very much caused by the situation that I found myself in. So it was very much external driven. So things that were happening to me, and my ability or inability to deal with some of it.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting that you said that, because I think from personal experience, when you said that, what you said there just resonated with some of the experiences I personally have been dealing with the last 6 months. I feel like been a bit of a situational depression as well. So that kind of why that rang through for me as well. You also mentioned something about talking, and I'd like to read an article and hear what your perspective is on this. This is an article I just saw in the Globe and Mail from a guy. It's named, and I'm probably going to mispronounce his last name. Philip Moscovich wrote this on the 28th. It's nearly Bell Let's Talk Day. You know, the one day of the year where social media is flooded with messages urging us to talk about mental health and feel good about doing it. It talks about on its Let's Talk website, Bell boasts about donating more to mental health. The words mental illness rarely appear and use in aid slogans such as mental health affects us all. Money from the campaign goes to causes including fighting the stigma, a vague sounding goal that puts the onus on people facing prejudice to end the discrimination against them. Canada has no shortage of mental health advocacy and awareness groups. In I Province, the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia holds an annual gala fundraiser complete from local celebrities and politicians. The organization's key platitude, #changing the way people think. It goes on to say this: there is little evidence that these kind of campaigns have had any significant effect on changing people's beliefs or behavior. A study published in the medical journal The Lancet in 2015 said that when it comes to medium and long-term effectiveness of anti-stigma campaigns, there is some evidence of effectiveness in improving knowledge and attitudes, but not for behavioral outcomes. In other words, people might change the way they think, but not how they behave. So I kind of want to hear from you, sort of your perspective. And for those who don't know, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you can follow Suzanne on Change and Thrive on Twitter as well. From the social media perspective, from what you have seen in your part in the conversation, how much is that true? And how much is that... is there some truth to that, or maybe do we have some ways to go? What are your thoughts?
I think we're always going to have a way to go. I know that through a lot of the people a lot of the people I follow on Twitter, it is all about mental health advocacy. And so it's people with lived experience. And it gives people the opportunity to discuss their experiences and maybe the issues they had around getting a diagnosis and some of the issues that they face with accessing services, and quite often with the stigma and discrimination that they face with having mental illnesses. It gives them a voice that perhaps they didn't have before. And it allows people to be part of that discussion and say, that's the same experience I've had, or that's not the experience I had. Mine was very different. It was positive because I engaged with this service. And so it's been really quite eye-opening, especially the amount of men, excuse me, that are starting to talk about their mental health on Twitter in particular, which is phenomenal. Because quite often we know men don't want to speak about their mental health. You know, they've been told, you know, suck it up, man up. And, you know, those are things we need to stop saying. Feelings, mental health, we need to be discussing them. We need to be feeling that it's okay to discuss them. And I think that's still very new. I think we've got a long way to go, but at least we're now having those discussions.
Yeah, it's there at this time of year when it's the Bell Let's Talk. I feel like there's a section of people that are very supportive to what the idea is of Bell Let's Talk and are supportive to it. And some people feel very cynical about the motivation of Bell, about what their involvement is. I don't even think, but at the end of the day, my observation, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is it seems to people just kind of have moved away from really from Bell's motivation and just actually kind of naturally, organically fit in and have the actual conversation, and almost in a sense have removed Bell from it and have just spent this day as a day to talk about it. That's kind of becoming more of my organic observation. I don't know if you're seeing that the same way.
I think maybe in a way as well, I was kind of like, oh, you know, what are Bell hoping to gain from this? And I think that, you know, as we have more people speaking out, I was just having a quick look on Twitter before, and you know, from this area, the University of Calgary, Mount Royal University, their sports teams have got, they're having discussions around mental health. And, you know, Hayley Wickenhauser is a great advocate for mental health, as is Sheldon Kennedy. I think it's bringing forward those voices that perhaps would have done this anyway. But Bell has kind of broadened that platform a bit. So, yeah, there's still part of me thinks, yeah, Bell's getting a lot of great publicity out of this. But at the same time, if it's raising awareness and it's raising money for services, then that's a great thing.
Yeah, I think, and I think so too. But what areas do you think, in terms of the conversation that you've seen, you talked a little bit about you're hearing more from men, kind of specifically, where have we made some improvements? Where have you seen kind of some change in a positive way with this conversation?
I think maybe around, I mean, obviously there's still lots of issues with men, and particularly young men, and their mental health, and speaking up about it. And there's that fear, I think, still of being perceived as being weak if you do speak up. And I think, you know, having been a hockey billet mum, the kids on the sports teams, they are a little bit more aware now. It's maybe not a conversation that they'll have one-on-one, but certainly I've had the boys come to me and saying, oh, you know, I'm a bit stressed. I'm more stressed than I would normally. And it's great that they feel that they can open up and have that conversation. I don't know whether they're having it at the team level, sort of with each other, but I think definitely there's more of that happening.
Yeah, within your organizations, that's good. I think especially young. Yeah, when I was younger, I still feel young. By the way,
You're still young.
I'm still young, but it's kind of as I have grown up, the macho-ness that, not that I had a lot of macho-ness that I carried around in my own life, but the macho-ness kind of breaks down a little bit, and there's change of the core of who you are, and just saying, hey, it's okay that you're feeling this way can go a long way to help somebody, even a little bit, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And in terms of, I know that there's the stats about it's affecting more. We talked about that in the intro about the numbers that affect the mental health, about affecting men 4 times more than women. But in terms of the conversation around women and mental health, especially during now with a time where we're seeing a lot of women in political realms, celebrity realms, those speaking out on opinions being attacked for those opinions and feeling threats. What are your thoughts around the progress around that conversation? Are we ignoring that, or has there been some progress there? What are your thoughts? Is that too broad of a question, maybe, or?
I'm just thinking, in some ways, it feels as if we've taken a few steps forward and a few steps back, and it's almost like there's this constant dance, like where women are becoming better at speaking up. I think there's so much happening at the moment, and at the same time, they do still get attacked. You know, they've got these fantastic voices. They're speaking out. They're advocates, and yet people still find a way to knock them down over and over again. And at some stage, we've got to say this is not okay. And how we do that without people saying it's not okay to do that.
That's, yeah, and being supportive of each other in that space, I think is helpful as well. And saying it in a helpful, healthy manner can be a struggle, I think.
Yeah, it's not always easy to find the right words, but sometimes people need you to say, you know, I'm struggling with what the right words might be. I don't really know how to say it, but I support you. I've got you. It's sometimes you just need to know that people are there, that they are ready to listen.
We'll get into that in a second here, because I do think active listening, talking about how that works is important. But what are some areas that you feel in terms of, if I gave you the magic wand and said that you are in charge of how the mental health conversation is going forward in Canada, where would be some areas that you would say we need to make some steps here, and here?
I would say definitely with kids. And I'm kind of talking right through the sort of 0 to 18. Kids experience so much right from the get-go. You know, once they start school, once they move into middle school, there's that constant trying to navigate what's happening. And at the same time, you're growing, you're developing, you don't really know what's going on a lot of the time. And that can be really, really difficult. And it's about having parents and adults just being supportive and listening and saying, okay, I'm here. I'm listening to what you have to tell me. And I care about you. What can I do to help? And then sometimes it is about, the next step. Who do we go to? Is it the family doctor? Is it, how much help do we need?
It was funny. Alicia Perot and I had a conversation around this back in September, with with a mom as well. Kim came on as well. We actually conversed a little bit about wondering if teachers and educators and those in the school system are truly equipped to handle mental health crisis. Because it's of course, obviously working in a school is very much an overwhelming job on so many levels, because over class sizes, not enough funding, not enough hours in the day, not enough time to spend specifically with students that may need a little bit more work than others. How do you feel about that? What are you seeing? How can that be improved?
Well, I've got a 14-year-old and a soon-to-be 16-year-old. And we can't expect teachers to do everything. And we know that they're already overwhelmed, but how do we build it into their training so that they have the understanding of mental illness? And, I think most teachers are incredibly good at picking up when a child has something going on, something that's bothering them. But like you say, it's having the time to do something about it. And, the school nurses are a great resource for that. Thinking back to my time in the UK, school nurses were a resource that was used. If there was something going on, then sometimes the kids would go and speak to the school nurse or go and seek out the counsellor. It's about having those people in the schools, I think, that can help the child. It's one of the things that I talk about a lot is having a community of support or a network of support. And I think we need to make sure that that happens within schools as well, so that people are not feeling as if they have to deal with everything on their own. There are people they can go to and get support and advice and, just share it and kind of bat it back and forth a little bit and say, this is what's happening. Do you have any advice for me? Have you seen it before? Because we can't deal with everything on our own. We're a very interconnected people that just we like to connect, and connection is so important, and we need to find ways to do that.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely, and any ways that there can be support around that, I think, can help, even as kids from high school transition into post-secondary and on into the workforce. I think it is important. We'll build to that, but in terms of some general listening skills, what are some? I guess the best way that I'm wording this question, and I'm hoping that you break it down and even correct how I'm saying it. The warning signs are things that people need to be just aware of, not even in the sense of something major, but even something a little bit minor that people can start listening and asking. How do you describe or teach active listening? What are your thoughts on that? I guess I'm trying to simplify that a little bit.
Well, active listening is kind of what it says. It's not just passive. It's not just hearing the words. It's about allowing someone that time and space to open up. And it's watching, how are they acting? Are they, what are the facial expressions like? Are they all crunched up? Have they, are the shoulders really stooped? Are they looking down? And sometimes it is about allowing that space into the conversation, just to sit and be uncomfortable with the silence, just to let the person know that you're there. And to acknowledge what they're saying. So, allowing them to speak and maybe reflect it back a little bit, just so that they hear their own words, perhaps paraphrased, just to show that you have paid attention, that you're giving them your ears, you're letting them speak, you're focusing on them, you are present with them, and not, sometimes sitting there and nodding is a good thing, but at the same time, that can be really off-putting, just to have someone sitting there and nodding.
Yes. But yeah, for sure. It's because nodding doesn't necessarily mean listening. It's just nodding, right? So, and like in terms of even like in terms of as they transition into university, you talked a little bit about like specifically the conversation between those from 0 to 18. If they're struggling there, I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form, but I'm not expecting by the time someone turns 19 that they have figured it out. How do you figure it out? How do you start to learn better ways of communication? Does that just come with maturity, or and maybe age, or in your mind, like, are the resources out there to help people be aware of how to support the stigma, per se?
All of the above, I think. As we get older, we perhaps have more confidence in what we're saying, what we're doing. One of the things that can come sort of in that time as you are transitioning to university or whatever, or into the workplace, is, from a brain development perspective, the brain's not done developing. So impulse control and making rash decisions and things like that, they're not done. You're still capable of doing, think about a lot of teenage behavior I think back to my university days, and I'm so grateful that we didn't have iPhones, that we didn't have Facebook or Twitter, because my parents would be absolutely appalled. And so, yes, I think part of it is age, it is experience, and we all learn in different ways. There's so many different ways. I mean, I'm one of those people, I make mistakes over and over again. It can take me quite a few times to learn a lesson. And it's not beating yourself up about those things. It's about listening to what other people are saying and, asking for help. And that's something that's really, really difficult, is asking for help. And I still struggle with it now at 46. And I know when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was even worse at it then. Mm-hmm. So it's a skill that has to be learned, I think. Mm.
Yeah. And also, there's still... Yeah, it definitely is a skill. And unfortunately, there's still... in the university area, there's certainly some I will get into the workplace in a moment, but so I was reading a story this week at the University of Alberta. There was a young man that attempted to end his life twice in the dorms of the University of Alberta, and because of that, they asked him to leave.
Yeah.
And he found it kind of funny because there's all of these things around here, around his dorm, saying, reach out for support, reach out for help. And he's getting punished he's actually getting punished for and asked to leave, which he felt, and which is obviously a major error on the university's part, and they have since corrected that. But in terms of university, like I guess from that question that I'm coming up here is what is the difference between, and maybe this is some of the criticism around Bell Let's Talk Day and the social media stuff. What's the difference in your mind between the rah-rah, hashtag, social media cheer on, and real, genuine, I am here to support you no matter what help?
Well, one of them's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to do a hashtag Bell Let's Talk and to say, yeah, on social media, it's like, yeah, I'm here for you. I can do things. And then your friend may come to you and tell you something, and it's like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to deal with this. And it's fine to feel like that. And I think that's where empathy comes in so much. And that was one of the things, because I read the same article about the poor fella in the University of Alberta, and I was just so shocked. It was like, can you not empathize? How would you feel if that was your brother, your son, your nephew, your friend? How would you feel if they clearly needed help and support and you haven't done anything except to punish that? And that's why people don't speak out, because they're scared that there is going to be some sort of punishment. So I think it's, can you tell I've been reading Brené Brown? It's very much about that empathy and letting people talk. And sometimes it is saying, I don't know what to say or what to do, but can we try and figure it out together? I'm just going to sit with you. Or can I drive you somewhere? Can I call someone for you? Sometimes it's just about those little things that show that you care. They don't have to be big. Nobody's expecting that Bell is going to sort all of our mental health issues out, or that we're going to resolve mental illness through their funding and everything. And I think we've got to be aware of what we can and can't do. And if you're really struggling to help somebody, then tell them, say, I don't know what to do. They may not have an answer for you. They may not particularly need you to do anything. But sometimes they might just need that listening ear.
Yeah, and as I say this as a man, in general with men, we do like to solve things. And it's not always that we cannot solve everything, and sometimes it's just okay. Mm-hmm. In terms of the workplace, how are you feeling that from the conversations you're having and hearing, are you finding workplaces are being more supportive about mental health? Are you, like, if there was someone in a workplace that's working in a workplace in HR or in a management role, what are some things that they need to have education on that they don't at this point?
I think one of the things that I did that was super useful, was actually to do the course Mental Health First Aid at Work. Mental Health First Aid. And that just teaches you different skills and gives you more information about different types of mental health problems and different mental illnesses as well. And it takes a lot of the fear out of it, because I think nobody wants to be. I mean, I'm sure my manager didn't want me to turn around and say, "Yeah, I've got pretty bad anxiety and depression. I need to go home right now." And so I think having the courses like that, and also knowing in the employee and family programs that are associated as part of the HR policies and everything, is how do people access those? Because the EFAPs they're huge resources, and you can go on there and you can speak to somebody. There's email counselling. You can make an appointment with a local therapist, and it's about knowing that there are resources and that you don't have to be the only person to deal with it. And I think, from a policy perspective, there's a lot more happening than there was maybe even 5 years ago.
Yeah, I remember going through a battle of depression when I was at my former employer a few years ago, and was sort of, at that time, it felt a little bit like there was a balance of, we're here to support you, but but still buck up a bit. But then but then I also was able through my former workplace do the mental health first aid that you're talking about, and it really, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes about some of the things that they are talking about, and some of the things that you just take for granted that are mental health issues, and just little things that we get so frustrated about. And it's like, you don't know what it's like to be in somebody else's shoe. And even in that shoe, even if you know a little bit, it's still one of the things I learned is everything is just so different. Even there's no right or wrong way that someone is going through something. It's the way that they are going through that. I think that's one of the benefits of the course, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found it so valuable because you don't know. None of us know what anyone else is going through, like you say. And when people do disclose that they have a mental illness, yes, there may be a moment of like, oh, but it means you can just start with the conversation and say, okay, how are you doing today? And it's about opening up that awareness that I think so many people, I think we're so scared of mental illness. I think over the years, the media has portrayed mental illness really badly and made it something that's really, really scary. But there are millions of people living with mental illness on a daily basis, and to a greater or lesser extent. And they're living their lives. They're doing the best they can.
And some days are better than others.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm curious what your thoughts about, it was coming into my brain as we talk about, the media has been so scared to talk about mental health. I want to ask you a little bit about what's coming in my mind is positive thinking. Now, I'm not opposed to positive. I think thinking positively is really important. Don't get me wrong. I think it's trying to find and keep a positive mindset in all circumstances can help. But at the same time, I've also wondered from my own personal experience if there's a detriment to it, because it almost doesn't give that permission to be unhealthy. And like the media and the commercials are always, and what I've appreciated, by the way, about some of the Bell Let's Talk commercials this year is especially the ones around work where they have that one conversation where it's like, he says one word and then he realizes what he says and he says, I should have done it differently.
Mm-hmm.
I've really liked how Bell Let's Talk have done the commercials this year. But even in terms of our positive thinking, is like, oh, even if we're stumbling along here, we still need to be positive, or, you can do it, or it's kind of the over positivation of our culture has it impacted how we've looked at mental illness? Like, if we're in a mentally ill state, is it a negative mindset? Is it perceived in some ways as a negative mindset?
Yeah, I think it could be. I think sometimes there's that, well, you can talk yourself out of it. If you were just a bit more positive, then you wouldn't be so depressed. And that's not how it works. If I'm around someone and they're positive all the time, then it kind of makes me wonder, what's going on with you? Because we do all have bad days, and, you can be, I don't know whether it's the right word is optimistic, but it's, I've had a bad day, and tomorrow is a new day, and it's going to be different. And I think when you're trying to look for the positives in everything, maybe you're building yourself up to bigger problems, because we're not perfect, and making mistakes and failing every now and again and feeling crappy. If we didn't have those things, we wouldn't know when we were feeling good. And that's how we learn as well. So yeah, I do worry a bit about all the, you can do it, great job.
Yeah. Let's get to the midlife where you're passionate about, between the ages of 40 to 60, and kind of the mental capacity around there. What are I'm going to ask a specific question about something in a little bit, but what are some of the mental health challenges that you are noticing with the people that you are passionately working with?
One of the things is there's a lot of changes in midlife, and that doesn't matter whether you are male or female. And a lot of it is, is this a midlife crisis? I'm going to buy myself a new car. I'm going to go and do a master's in psychology. And, is this a midlife crisis? And no, it isn't. It's an opportunity that has perhaps not raised its head before, so you're going to grab a hold of it. But, you may have kids that are growing up, they're moving out of the house, and that is a big change. And from the work perspective as well, there's a lot of changes, because you may be in a position where you think, this is great, I've worked my way up the ladder, I'm happy where I am, I can still keep going. Or you may just think, I'm kind of done with the workplace. It's time for me to get out. It's time for me to find a new career path, because those are things that are open to us now that perhaps people felt they needed to kind of suffer along with in the past. And I think there's freedom that comes with that. And sometimes it's like, I don't know whether I should be feeling this way. But at the same time, there's a lot of like, oh, thank goodness, I can make these choices, I can do what I want, and I don't really care what other people think.
What is a midlife crisis, in your opinion?
Well, from the research that I did, and there is stacks and stacks of information about midlife crisis, but there are quite specific criteria around what a crisis would be. So it's not just you went out and bought yourself a new motorbike or something like that. It goes a lot deeper than that. And I think, again, you start edging your way towards your 40s or your 50s or 60, and you're kind of thinking, well, when's that shoe going to drop? When's the midlife crisis going to happen? And you start looking for signs of it, sort of, I did this, I did that. Is this a midlife crisis? And most of the time it's not. I'm not a big fan of the midlife crisis. I think it's very much media driven.
How so?
It's been a good thing for the media to hang the hat on, I think, for a long time. I mean, there are so many stereotypes around it, and it makes people quite fearful around their midlife, because they think, I don't want to be that person that's trying to, that I'm aging and I don't want to be aging, so I'm going to pretend that I'm younger. And midlife is a time where, we see things go. We've had a lot of fun, we've had a lot of experiences in our youth, and now we're moving towards different types of fun, perhaps more fun and more experiences, but just maybe doing them in a different way.
You were learning to have fun as opposed to practicing fun when we were younger?
I think it's a different type of fun. A lot of the fun, sometimes when we're in our youth, is very peer driven. It's kind of keeping up with everybody else. And, I've got to go out and we've got to go dancing, or we've got to go drinking, or we've got to go and do something high adrenaline, because that's what we do at this age. And as you get more towards your 40s or 50s or whatever, I don't want to do that, because I don't find that a lot of fun, and I would rather sit down with a glass of wine and watch a good movie, because that's fun for me.
We're more comfortable in our skin.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of the opposite of teenagehood. As a teenager, you're trying lots of different skins and, trying to find out where you fit in, and you get to midlife and you go, oh, this is me.
But what about those that are struggling with what they feel like they have accomplished? Like, I wanted to have, this one, I think affects men and women. I wanted to be married, own a house, and have a couple of kids by the time I'm 40. And that hasn't happened for them. What is that more about? Is that crisis, or just feeling that a bit of disappointment, or how do you assess that?
I'm not an expert, so
I
can't say.
Yeah.
But I would think with a crisis, there would be a lot more to it, sort of perhaps guilt and shame, and maybe blaming, and sort of finding more negative ways to work through things. Whereas I think this is, again, one of those times when, are they things that you really want for yourself, or are they things that, as you were growing up, everyone had them, and so they seem like a good idea? And, are you happy with your life? You may not be married, you may not have children, and yes, you wanted those in the past, but do you still want those now?
So it's more of a reflection period than a midlife crisis per se. It's like maybe those things that you thought were important to you aren't as important as they were.
Yeah, it's very much a time of reflection and looking back and taking stock and thinking, what do I want to change? Do I have to change it, or am I happy with the way things are?
The one I wanted to specifically ask, because I don't think I've heard enough about this, and probably because I'm not necessarily the person that should hear about this, but I do think it's an important topic. I don't know what your postpartum depression is something that is common. It happens a lot, but I don't know if there's a lot of conversation around that. Are you in agreement with me on that, or is this? What are your thoughts on the conversation around that, and kind of some of the signs or things to be aware of there?
I think there is more discussion about it now.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Than there has been. Yeah. Because I think people are more aware that they may have signs and symptoms. So we know that after we have a baby, that there is that period, sort of the postpartum blues, where you may feel down and overwhelmed and exhausted. But how long has that been going on for? If it goes on more than a couple of weeks, what do we need to be looking out for? And it's one of those things where if you're not feeling good about yourself, if things are feeling really slow and sluggish and you're having problems, then you need to go and speak to somebody, because it could be postpartum depression. And one of the things we know is that there are lots of treatments available, and they're not all pharmaceutical. And there's good recovery from postpartum depression. And I think, celebrities, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I think there are more celebrities talking about it, that it's okay not to feel okay and to go and ask for help.
That's a good point. I think that fits all of what we've talked about today in terms of that it's okay not to feel okay. I like that. I think we've covered a lot. Is there other things that we've maybe have missed in this conversation that you feel are very important?
I would say a lot of the work I do is with parents in early childhood. And one of the things that we say is help children learn about their feelings and about their emotions. And so explore with them how they're feeling and reflect that to them, and have those conversations from when they're really little, so that they're used to talking about how they feel, so that they have the words to explain, I'm frustrated right now. I don't know what to do. I'm angry. I'm scared. I'm really happy, because all of those feelings can be very, very overwhelming for small children. It can be overwhelming for parents as well to watch their kids go through that. And I think if we give children the vocabulary to speak about how they're feeling, then that makes things a little bit easier. Let's encourage them from as young as possible to talk about how they feel. Because when you can talk about it and you can recognize it in other people as well. So it is those things about, a smiley face, that's happy. How do they recognize that in themselves? How do they recognize that in other people? And just give them the words, because a lot of people don't have the vocabulary to say how they're feeling.
So it's like an apprentice, or give them a tool, and then that tool can build on another tool, which can build on another tool, which can build on, And as they grow, they understand more about what's going on in terms of mental health. Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
We do that with physical health. You know, we give them the tools to speak about how, you know, those are my feet, that's my nose, that's my head, you know, this hurts, I've got an owie. So why wouldn't we teach them to talk about how they feel? Because kids will say things like, my tummy hurts, or I've got a headache, and is that because they may well have a tummy ache, they may well have a headache, but it may be because they're feeling a little bit anxious about something, they may be excited about something.
Yeah, because mental health does affect the physical. We know that. That's obvious. But it's so funny how we take our physical health so much more. Yeah, my elbow hurts. I need to get that fixed. But yet, and I admit, I'm part of that problem where it's like my mental health. I don't, or mental health, we don't go get that checked out as much. And partially because is there a fear of cost around this?
I would say so. I mean, going to see a family doctor, that's great. But if you want to go for talk therapy and you don't have insurance, then you may not be able to access that. But at the same time, there are services that have sliding scales of payments that can help out. And sometimes we've got to, and that's one of the things I do on Twitter a lot. It's share things like Calgary Distress Centre and things like that. Share their posts so that people know there are places they can go. And that, there are sliding scales and they will help them with costs, because it can be really expensive to go and see somebody for talk therapy or for prescriptions if you don't have insurance.
Yes, it's very much. And it's not necessarily, back to the workplace, it's not necessarily well covered in a lot of workplace plans, not as well as some physical coverage is. Like if you go to the eye doctor or you go there, that's a little bit more well protected or well covered than mental health, which it is a huge struggle, I think. And I don't know, like coming up here, I know that we're in Alberta, there's going to be a provincial election coming up here. But I really hope that the coverage around how mental health is covered is at least somewhat conversed in this election, because I hope all three parties, I believe the Alberta NDP are anyway taking it seriously, and I hope the other parties are taking that seriously as well, because it is very expensive and it's very difficult to find someone who they can feel safe to have that important talk therapy with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you find that person, you don't want to let them go because you can only afford 2 sessions.
Yeah. And it takes more than 2 sessions to really delve into some of those conversations. So,
yeah, like you say, just having somebody that you feel comfortable with, it takes time to build that relationship and that rapport where someone feels comfortable enough to do that.
Yeah, and it's hearing some things from an expert can often be better than is always a bit more beneficial than, not that talking to your friends isn't important, but there's so much more to that you can walk through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's very important as well. So kind of tell us a little bit as we close here, where we can find you, what you're working on, things like that. Your Twitter, your Facebook, your social media. What are you up to?
Well, I can be found at Change and Thrive on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. There is a Change and Thrive page as well. And I'm in the process of developing my website, which is changeandthrive.ca.
It's a very witty website. I liked your little introductions around there are men and women. We all struggle with it. I really liked how you worded it in a way that we're all kind of going through the same thing, and nothing different between us.
Yeah, well, we all have mental health. We all have mental illness to, a greater or lesser extent. And, we have anxiety, we have depression, not as an everyday occurrence, but they're things that can come up quite quickly, and some of us are more predisposed to them. And I wanted it to be as inclusive as possible, that, it doesn't matter whether you're male or you're female, if you're 30, if you're 70, it's, we're not that different, really.
No, we're really not. And I think that's where Bell Let's Talk has done a great job is and social media is that we're all in this together, and nobody's really that different. Of course, you can find me on Facebook, Kevin Olenek. You can like, agree, or disagree the podcast on Facebook as well. Follow me on Twitter, KVOLE, Instagram, Spreaker.com, KVOLE is where all the podcasts are, and you can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I really thank you very much for taking the time. It was a little bit last minute to get you on, but I really appreciate you taking the time and having this conversation, and I know that people will be impacted in a positive way by this.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for everyone that is listening. We'll end a little bit with some, because we talked about this during the podcast. We'll end with a little bit of perspective with Brené Brown, and we will talk to you all very soon. Bye now.
Dads. Because the women in my life are harder on me than anyone else. So I started interviewing men and asking questions. And what I learned is this. You show me a woman who can actually sit with a man in real vulnerability and fear, I'll show you a woman who's done incredible work. You show me a man who can sit with a woman who's just had it. She can't do it all anymore. And his first response is not, I unloaded the dishwasher. But he really listens, because that's all we need. I'll show you a guy who's done a lot of work.